Welcome back to Mums on a Mission. I'm your host, Julie Hatch, and this is episode number 7 of Mums on a Mission. And today I'm going to be talking about the name of the show is The Pleasures and Pitfalls of Parenting in the Early Childhood Years. I've had a request from somebody to talk about toddlerhood. So toddlerhood certainly falls within these early childhood years. So I'm going to talk about the early childhood years, why they're so important, challenges that you're likely to face during the early childhood years, and especially toddlerhood and behaviors that you find in toddlerhood. Now, the first 7 to 8 years, which is what I'm considering early childhood, are, I think, most professionals in the area of parenting and childhood psychology would say that they are the most important years in any person's life, from birth to age 6, 7, 8, around them. Partly because they're at home, the rest of the world isn't having their influence on them. And it's just a time of life where they absorb so much. They absorb everything. And we often aren't aware of how much they do absorb, because they don't express themselves verbally to us. I think that memory tends to start when we're able to start talking, and when in the pre-verbal years, before a child can talk, there aren't too many memories. But it doesn't mean that there isn't a whole lot of information getting stored in the conscious and the unconscious. They're just little sponges sucking up everything their environment is giving to them. And their environment includes a lot of influences. So these are really critical years. It's important to know how critical they are. Again, even though you think that they're just, a little baby sitting there, eating, sleeping, pooping, and then they get to be a little bit older, they're absorbing everything. They're picking up everything in their environment. And so it's important to be aware of that. And it's hard as first-time parents. What do you do with this child that you have no experience? You don't know how to what they're needing or what they're wanting. So it's a challenge as first-time parents. Those oldest children are the experiments of us all. We try things out on them and see how it works, and then the subsequent child number 2, 3, 4, and 5 probably fare better. Now, one thing to know. And especially if you don't really know what to do, you have a child here and you're not quite sure what to do with it, or how to interact with it, or how to respond to it or react to it, is to be aware that we are their mirrors. They learn everything from us, from little infancy up through teenagerness. They learn everything from us. Well, not teenagerness, because teenagers start to learn a lot from their friends and the community. But in the first 7 to 8 years, they are learning everything from us because they have no reference point. Kids that are in the home environment is their reference point. So if mom and dad are fighting all the time and there's a lot of anger and screaming and yelling, the child accepts that that's the way the world is. That's the way every home is that they fight and scream and yell. And that's what they learn to do, which is not what we want. Or a child who grows up in a home where both parents are really busy with working and social life and a whole lot of other parts of life, and they're not spending a whole lot of time at home or with their child, then the child thinks, oh, well, this is normal. This is the way that every family is that the child is sort of left behind and not paid a whole lot of attention to. Or loving. If the home is loving, then the child learns the importance of love. They feel that love, and they learn to express love and to be loving. And if there isn't a whole lot of love in the environment, then that's what they grow up knowing, thinking, well, they don't know love. Everything that's in their environment when they're young in these first few years is just everything that they learned, and they absorb it, and it goes deep into their subconscious and into the deep inside in themselves. And only when they're adults going through therapy do they then uproot all of this stuff that was influencing them back when they were little. So conscious parenting is about how to raise our kids in a way that we want to show them the best way to be. And the way to show them how we want them to be is to be what we want them to be. So we are their mirrors. They learn everything from us. Likewise, they are our mirrors. If you see something going on with your child and you're thinking, wow, where did they learn that? Or why are they being this way? Take a look at yourself or your spouse or your partner or whoever, and you'll probably find the source of where that behavior or activity or interaction is coming from. Because again, until they go out to school or daycare, they don't have any other influences of learning behaviors and how to be. So take a look at, like I say, if there's something with your child that you don't quite get and you don't like and you don't understand, take a look at yourself or your partner. For instance, a child, it's always funny, I'm sure it happened with my kids, when little kids come out with big swear words or the F-bomb or just words that just take you back. You think, where did they learn from? They weren't born knowing that word. They heard it and learned it from somewhere, and it's usually tied to a fit of frustration or anger, or mom or dad let out the 4-letter word. And of course, that's the word that the child picks up and echoes back at them at some inopportune time. So anyways, what you are exhibiting is what they pick up. They are little sponges. They pick up everything that we say, that we do, even the things that we don't say, those unspoken, silent messages. They pick up on those. They pick up on our energy. They pick up on the energy of the environment. They pick up everything. And again, they're not aware of it. We're often not aware of it until much later, either many years later or a few years later or well into adulthood, but they pick up everything. So it's just important to be aware of that. And if you don't know anything to do with your child, just present the best you that you can to them. And that's what they will see. Oh, well, this is, I mean, they're not saying this in their heads, but they will learn it. This is the way I'm supposed to be. I'm supposed to be loving. I'm supposed to be compassionate. I'm supposed to be non-violent, non-angry, whatever it may be. So this means that the environment is what is largely what has strong influence on kids. And our environment in which a child lives has an enormous influence on them. So if you have an environment full of love and tenderness and unconditional love and support and nurturing and all that good stuff that parents ideally offer to their children, low or moderate stress, then that's what the child is going to internalize. Love, low stress, nurturance, support, and so that's all good stuff. We would love our kids to be demonstrating all of that stuff. Whereas if they live in a high-strung, high-stress, angst, full of fear kind of environment, that's what they're going to internalize, and that's what's going to come out in themselves as little kids, as older kids, and as adults. So things that happen in these first 7 to 8 years in the environment that they're in is going to come out in spades. And this actually comes for ourselves as well. When we were kids, if we had any kind of traumatic events happen when we were growing up that got buried or squelched or not processed, which is likely because that's consciousness and mindfulness is not big back then when we were young and we went through certain traumas or dramas when we were growing up. Those events, if they're not processed and talked about, they get squelched and they get buried, and then they come out. They always come out at some point. And typically it's in adulthood, and really typically it's once you're a parent. It comes out tenfold. So what you are bringing to your family as a parent stems a lot from your childhood. So your stressors, your triggers, what sets you off, is very likely comes from your childhood and what happened back then. So there's a whole lot of psycho muck there, but it's important to know, again, just to reiterate, that those first formative years, 7 years or so, were really important to you as a person, and it's certainly important to your child and how they're going to turn out as adults. The environment also includes not only how we are behaving, the energy that we emit, our moods, our emotions, all picked up by our little spongy little kids who pick everything up. But also, food is an important part of their environment and how it can affect their behavior and their cognition and all kinds of things. And I'm going to do a whole episode on the importance of food and what they're eating, and how just changing simple changes in the diet can make huge differences in behavior a lot of the time. But that's a whole nother episode. Also in the environment, as I said, the energy of the home, what kind of energy is going on between other family members, from mom, from dad, from other siblings, interpersonal interactions, physical activity, how much physical activity are people getting, how much are people outside. I'm going to talk about that in another episode also, the importance of playing outside. Makes a big difference on their behavior. So that's part of their environment. Mom and dad get outside with the kids and get them outside, exercising, being physical, and having some time outside. Likewise, how much technology is being used in the home. Is everybody sitting on their screens all day long? That's not a very good environment. And again, it's up to us as parents to model what we want to see our kids experience and then demonstrate back to us. So to toddlerhood, which is certainly part of these early childhood years and is a big stage for everybody, for the parents and for the child. And toddlerhood, people think of terrible twos as toddlerhood. I personally thought that the threes were worse than the twos. But in any case, whether they're 2 or 3 or 4, whenever they go through this toddlerhood change, it's a big change. And it's such an important time for them, because up until toddlerhood, they have been really just an extension of us. They were just little beings that were fed and slept and pooped and laughed and smiled. But now in toddlerhood, it's like they're beginning to wake up and become themselves. They are merging into the little person that they are then going to grow up to be a big person. But their personality is starting to develop. And so with this comes a sense of identity. And toddlerhood is an important time for separating or understanding that they are no longer an extension of mom or dad, but they are their own person. And that is a huge revelation, that they are their own person, which means they have the power to say no. And they have the power to run away. And they're discovering all kinds of power that they have as just an individual, as a person. And it's really cool. It's great stuff to watch your child emerge into a real person. Whether or not they're able to talk, they have a lot to communicate. And certainly, temper tantrums is a big part of toddlerhood behavior. And temper tantrums are really that the child, for one thing, is trying to express a need. They realize that they want something or that they need something, and especially if they can't talk, they just have a tantrum and melt down, and they just have this incredible, strong feeling that they need something and they want to communicate it to you, and they can't, so they have to do it through their behavior. Eventually, as they learn how to communicate, either signing, which some people do now with their kids, or through verbal, until they can communicate, they will just have a tantrum to let you know that they are feeling so frustrated or angry or unhappy or whatever the emotion is. That's what they're feeling. And that is basically what behavior is, an expression of either an unmet need or a really strong feeling or emotion they just can't express. And so they take it out as a temper tantrum or anger or whatever it may be. But toddlerhood certainly is known for temper tantrums. And so it's important to know that to try not to get mad at them for having a temper tantrum. They can't help it. They just can't help themselves. They're trying to let you know that just something is not right. So toddlerhood is a time of independence and finding their identity. And independence is a big thing. As they start to be able to walk and move away from you, they realize that they can move away from you. And it's a push pull kind of a thing. They go back and forth between independence and dependence. And so they'll toddle away from you and they'll look back to see if you're still there and watching them. And then eventually they'll come toddling back to you and they want to hang on to your lap. Sometimes you make it into a game. They look back and you start to chase them and then they run away. But always, they're not ready to be completely independent yet. And they will, they eventually come back. They need to know that you're there and that they can come back to you. They like to go off and try to be a little bit independent and say that they don't need you. And then they come back and they realize, of course, they need you. This is not unlike teenage years. Teenage years and toddler years are really very similar. Identity. Teens are learning are learning their identity. Toddlers are learning their identity as a child, just as their own person to begin with. And teens are beginning to learn to develop a more advanced identity, an identity that's going to carry them into adulthood. Identity and independence. Teens like to have their independence. And they also have the push-pull. They will go off and be independent, but then realize that they're not quite ready to do that and they need to come home and find mom and dad and be a little bit dependent for a little bit longer. But so toddlerhood is that way also. Identity and self-realization. They're beginning to realize that they are their own individual self, and so they develop their own identity, and it's really exciting for them, and it's really exciting as parents to watch this. And it's best for us to not get in the way, but let them express themselves. Let them find who they want to be and what they want to do. Likewise in teenage years, but in toddler years, this is the time that they are finding their individuality and showing that they are not just an extension of us, but they are their own person, and they're going to let you know that. With this comes the power of the word no. And again, the ability to run away and not be caught or be caught. But the power of the word no. And they love the power of the word no. They realize that, wow, I can say no and I'll get a reaction. So understand that, realize that no is a really strong personal feeling of personal power for them. Independence and dependence, and the tantrums again are really just an expression that they can't quite express. I said this before with element types, that sometimes when bad behavior comes out is because they're trying to express an unmet need or a feeling that doesn't feel good. Toddlerhood is that to the nth degree, that they just have all these things that they want to express and these feelings, and it's like they're coming alive. And so they're not perfectly shaped yet. They're still just in their 3s and 4-year-olds. But they have a lot to, they're beginning to experience a lot, which means that they're feeling a lot, and the tantrums are just an expression of that. And how to deal with tantrums, there are many different ways of dealing with tantrums. The first thing, though, is to understand they don't wake up in the morning and say, okay, I'm going to have a tantrum today and see how pissed off I can make mom. No, it's just a reaction to something that's going on. So to understand that. And sometimes I know that when my kids had tantrums, depending on where they were, if they were in the home, I could ignore it, let them just get it out, which they usually do. They'll get it out and then they'll calm down and feel better. If it's in public, like in the middle of the supermarket, I was always prepared that when I took my toddlers to the supermarket, that I would be prepared to pick them up, leave my groceries behind, and leave, which I had done a few times with my kids. Just pick them up, get them out of the situation that's bringing on this whatever feeling that they're having, remove them from the situation, and take them to the car and leave and come back and get the groceries later, but removing them from the situation. So there are different ways of trying to talk logic to them or try to understand what they're feeling in the moment is not likely to help. Maybe afterwards, later on, you can talk about it with them. But in the moment, they're just too wrapped up in their emotion of what they're feeling that it's not likely to happen. So you remove them or you leave them and let them get it out, and then talk about it afterwards. And it's just a fact of life. Temper tantrums are just part of toddlerhood. It is completely normal. It will pass, and it's a sign that they are finding themselves. They are finding their voice. They're finding their identity. They're finding that they are a separate person who can say no and who can carry on a tantrum, and they're just finding themselves, which is really a cool thing. So I think that is about it for the early childhood years for this time around. I'm going to wrap up now. So the 3 take-home points that I want to make that this whole episode was about was consider where you're coming from your childhood and your background and what you're bringing to your family as a parent based on your history. And what you're bringing as a parent has so much to do with how you were parented and your experiences as a kid. It's not good, bad, indifferent. It's not a judgment. It's just that what happens when you're young comes out a lot when you're older, and certainly when you're a parent. So just understand that, process it if you need to, and just be aware of it, and try to, if it, depending on your childhood and background, if it was really terrible and violent and traumatic and dramatic, want to stop that cycle. Don't pass it on to your kid. Be aware that that's what happened to you, and you're going to do better with your own child. Toddlerhood is a time of identity and independence, 2 really important characteristics as a child develops and grows. Letting them express their identity and letting them express their independence. Toddlerhood, you also have to watch out for safety because they want to be independent, but they don't know yet all of the safety. You can't let them just run around in the yard by a busy street and not be on top of them. Their independence they can try with, they can play around with it, and that's a great thing. But safety comes first, and that's the one area that you'll certainly need to take control of if their independence is taking them into areas of danger. Identity and independence. And finally, behavior, especially tantrums, are an expression of a strong emotion and or an unmet need. And getting mad about it and reacting is kind of natural, but is not necessarily the best way to go. So that is it for today. Thank you for listening. I would love for you to share this or like it or subscribe to the show. I can use some support here with this show. I want to share it with more and more parents, so please let people know about it and tune in, and I'll see you next time.